Now, aiming to regulate competition in telecommunications is the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. This as the watchdog plans to reduce voice communication costs and give smaller telecom players a leg up in the markets. Joining me to unpack this in greater detail is technology correspondent for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza. Mudiwa, always a pleasure. Hello.
Good afternoon, Oltando.
How are you today?
Alive, good, well, and thriving.
Fantastic. Always a pleasure having you in studio. Let's talk about these termination rates. Maybe helping us understand here. This does pertain to cross-network calling. Yes. Okay. Talk to us about it.
Okay, cool. So, I make a call to you. I'm on Vodacom. You're on MT. I think, let me use, I'm on Vodacom. You're on Telkom.
Okay.
Or rather the other way around. I think is an easier way.
Okay.
I'm on Telkom, you're on Vodacom. Right, I make a call to you. Now, the average price of a call in South Africa, you're sitting at around R1.80 to R2.20, somewhere there, depending on your network, voice deals, all of this stuff. But that's the out of bundle, out of deal, that's your average rate. Of that rate, right, Telkom has to pay Vodacom, currently has to pay Vodacom 13 cents of that amount to say the call originated on Telkom's network.
It came to you.
And it came to you on Vodacom's network. Vodacom makes the argument to say that to complete this call, there is an element of our network and our infrastructure that is being used, so we're charging you, and the rate at the moment is 13 cents per minute. There's a different rate because if you make the big operators are charged 9 cents currently, whereas the smaller operators, you're looking at Telkom, Cell C, and anyone else, you're looking at around 13 cents. That's the one that I was using earlier on. So the proposal is to halve those rates by mid this year. So big operators will be paying, it should be 4 cents across the, what you call this, no. It's going to be, it should be 7 cents. That'll be for the big operators. And then I think 9 cents for the smaller operators. But where we end up next year, by July next year, is 4 cents across the board. Yeah, that's basically what we're talking about. Operators have made a lot of money from this because imagine, you're not making, it's not your customer. You are basically charging someone to say, oh, you called someone on my network. I'm charging you, yeah.
So we do know that one of the big players here that have come out to be very vocal about the concerns around this is Telkom.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense because they own a lot of the fixed lines. So that was, if right now we use our office phone to form another, is that how it was working for them? And is this why they would possibly have the loudest voice here?
So what Telkom is really crying about is that this process that we're talking about right now has Telkom's interconnect rates sitting at, ending up at 1 cent. Right, which is a very small amount. I think currently they're sitting at around 6 or so cents, per minute. The cheapest call you can make in South Africa is to a fixed line or a landline right now. The most expensive is, what we described earlier on, mobile to mobile, especially from a smaller network onto onto a bigger network. So what Telkom is arguing to say is to say, okay, fine, we understand, because what they said is we welcome these new rates because as Telkom Mobile, it's going to help us as a smaller network from that point of view. But as a fixed line operator, right, it then hurts us because the rates are now just so meager that it's like it now becomes, well, in their words, they're saying it actually becomes in certain cases more expensive to make a call, for them. I think what they're looking like is this infrastructure cost that I was talking about. You're using our infrastructure, our network, to complete this call. We don't think that this is, enough money. Great that you are putting down the price to communicate, but what they were hoping for was that the rates would be more or less in line with what the mobile amounts are going to end up at, because currently where we're ending up is 4 cents per minute versus 1 cent per minute. So they're looking at those differentials and saying, hey guys,
it's too much.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense because Telkom is trying to be an infrastructure company, so being able to eke out as much value from the infrastructure is the whole model. But I want to speak about ICASA's proposal here and why there's a rationale behind this. I assume that, they're not trying to just beat the guys down. What is ICASA saying is the reason for these reduced rates, maybe even from a competition and concentration perspective?
So there's two big things that they're talking about. Firstly, it's just general, let's reduce the cost to communicate. Because when you look at communication in South Africa, there's the data conversation, which everyone has been shouting up and down about, for years. But tied to that, cell phones and phones still make calls. I don't know if,
Yeah, we know that anymore.
right? There's a generation that doesn't understand that, phone is actually used to make phone calls. And on that front, they're saying, let's reduce that cost to communicate. And this is their endeavor, on that front, to say, if we can reduce those fees around call terminations, then it will help to bring down, these tariffs that I spoke about at the beginning, an average of R1.80 to R2.20, depending on the network. Because if you look at some of the deals, Vodacom, I think, has some, some minutes deals where their calls actually cost like R1.55, depending on the deal, right? But if we can bring down the interconnect rates, hopefully we can then bring down, all of those rates, and therefore the cost to communicate for businesses, for consumers. One piece. Second piece is, because we are reducing all of these costs, they're saying let's also give some of the smaller players a bit, not a fighting chance, but a bit of a leg up. As I said, currently, if you're a smaller network calling onto a bigger network, if you're a smaller network, your termination rates right now sitting at 13 cents versus versus the 9 or so cents that the bigger players are enjoying, right? So already, if you're a smaller player, you're doing a much higher rate. But if we can bring them in line, with each other, then you're almost leveling out the playing field. So they think it's going to help to spur competition. There's a caveat, though.
Okay.
If you're a new entrant into the market, then you are going to be subjected to slightly higher prices for 3 years. Then you'll get to enjoy, some of these, new rates. I guess that's a bit of a concession that the regulator has brought in.
I must, you just mentioned it now, Mudiwa, but I must ask you this. I don't know when last I made a phone call by dialing a phone number. And look, it just is the way of life.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering here, when we think of the results that companies release, the telcos, the big guys, of course, the ones that we follow, but how much how much of that is voice? Is voice on the decline? If I think of work calls, for instance, that's done in-app on Teams, for instance, or if I think of a WhatsApp call quickly, with data. So I'm just wondering also, is this not a diminishing market, and therefore the efforts to heavily regulate it are futile because the world is changing?
The world is changing, and you are very right that the voice business in general has been declining. Is declining in South Africa, has been declining around the world. Even these termination rates that we're talking about right now have been declining, over the last couple of years. So there has been this decline for the operators when it comes to the money that they're making from voice as a whole, right? Now, the reason why the voice situation is interesting is because out of everything that mobile operators and, telecoms operators do, the voice business always carried such a high margin compared to data and all of these new services that we're enjoying now. This is why, even though it's something that's declining, there's still a lot of noise made about it, because you're still able to charge those premiums, you're still able to have those interconnect rates, you're still able to charge, the amounts that, that we're talking about. That's one piece of the discussion. The second piece of the discussion, I think I've touched on it maybe once or twice, right, briefly, to say one of the things that operators around the world are now talking about, and we've also seen local operators making some, noise about it. I think now that this is happening, we should revisit it as Business Day, is to say, over-the-top services, Netflix, Facebook, social media guys, streaming guys, all of these people, right? There's an argument that operators are making to say maybe these guys should be participating and giving us a fee, sort of like a toll, to say there's infrastructure you guys are benefiting from. You guys need to pay some type of a fee to enjoy access, to our networks. 20 of the biggest mobile operators in Europe, including Vodacom's parent, Vodafone, wrote this big letter last year, big open letter to the regulator in the EU, to make such a call. And it'll only be a matter of time. If that works out, sets precedent, and then you start to see similar actions happening, right? So people are already thinking to say, all these WhatsApp things that are happening, these Teams, Zoom,
What do they rely on?
right? How do we as operators make money off of the fact that you guys are still communicating, right, on our network? Yes, we're making money from data, cool, but there should be a direct fee from you guys as Facebook, Netflix, and and the like.
Like I always say, something always interesting happening in your sector, Mudiwa. Always a pleasure for hearing from you. That was technology correspondent for the Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza.